Just afternoon. Can I just say, real pleasure to be here at Browns Bay School. Erica and I wanted to come here. It's got a fantastic principal in Peter Mulcahy. He's actually due to retire at the end of the term, but what he's actually built in this place is pretty special. Every school has its challenges, and one of the things that we're talking about today is actually this is a school where today there's a young student that's showing up from Vietnam, doesn't speak any English, and actually ESOL as an investment is really important in this school. But what you've seen here is actually a school that's incredibly well led, incredibly well run, and a really good team, and it makes a difference, as you can see. So education is really important to us. Our message is really clearly on a back to school week is that this is one of the major challenges that New Zealand has. We have 55% of our kids not in regular school attendance. If that's the case, that means that those kids by the time they get to 15 will be 1 year behind where they need to be, and 1 year of learning behind as a result. And that doesn't set them up for success or our country up for success going forward. And that's why Erica and I have put such a big focus on education from when we had the leadership change 2 years ago. So that's a big focus for us. And so my message very clearly is to all parents is, hey, listen, you've got to wake up, you've got to talk to your kids, you've got to get them to school, we've got to start of a new school year. We need this to be a concerted effort from everybody, not just government, but also parents being called to responsibility to do the right thing, get their kids to school. We're doing our part, which is to make sure that we're banning the mobile phones. We moved incredibly quickly since forming a government last 2 weeks before Christmas, and schools have got that up and running and actioned. We've made sure that each school's got an hour of maths, reading and writing happening, and it's been exciting getting emails and talking to parents on telephone calls who've been saying, I've just received a new schedule of timetable for my kid, and it's fantastic to see this coming into place. Erica's also kicked off a process to make sure we review the maths and English curriculum in primary school. We have that finished by the end of the year, having been piloted, ready for implementation in a year's time. And obviously we're very interested in things like structured literacy and how we can improve reading and writing as a consequence of all of that. So I really appreciate you coming out here today because actually education is important to the future of our country. It's one of the major challenges that we have, and our position where we currently sit is just not sustainable or not going to lead to good outcomes for all of us going forward. With that, happy to take your questions.
Just started reporting on seeing notes that Casey Stello sent to health officials which specifically asked for advice on freezing tobacco excise. Are you going to be calling her in for more than just a coaching, but more of a please explain?
Oh, look, I haven't seen those reports. All I can say to you is we passed very quickly in one of our very first meetings in Cabinet a significant increase in excise tax on cigarettes, and that's been implemented. And that's exactly what that's the Cabinet paper that I saw, that's the Cabinet discussion that we had, and that we implemented that incredibly quickly.
You're now facing allegations, though, that one of your associate ministers has lied, misled the public and misled the Parliament.
Yeah, again, I haven't seen the stories, and in fairness, I need to be able to have that before I have any further comment. But all I can, but all I just say to you is, at the end of the day, we increased excise tax on cigarettes in complete consistency with what's happened in the past. We got one cabinet.
Can you rule out then what she is proposing, a freeze at any point?
Yeah, absolutely. She may ask.
She said yesterday in the House that she's still doing work on that.
Well, she may ask for a range of advice. She's determined to lower smoking rates across New Zealand. All I can tell you is we had a Cabinet paper come to Cabinet. It was a very up and down conversation. There was one proposal in it, which was to significantly increase the excise tax on cigarettes, consistent with what's happened in the past. We passed that. It was a simple conversation. So what I just say to you is she may be asking for a broad range of advice and feedback about what's possible and what should be thought about. But what I'm telling you is excise tax on cigarettes has gone up, it's been implemented, it's happening, and it will likely continue to go up as it has been our tradition over many decades.
She's like a nicotine to have that. Is she the right person to be responsible?
Look, I mean, I think our smoke-free position has been very poorly misrepresented. Let me answer the question. The story is that all we're saying is we're sticking with the legislation that we actually have had that has served us incredibly well in the recent decade. That same legislation has actually led for smoking rates, daily smoking rates, to go from 10 years ago at 16.7% down to 8.6%, and in the last year it dropped another almost 2 points, and we're on our way to smoke-free targets in 2025.
About your associate minister and a comment like that. Based on a comment like that, is she the right person to be in charge of that?
In my all I can say to you is that she's very determined to actually now deal with the 6.8% of New Zealanders that are daily smokers, to make sure that we actually continue to make big efforts in that. We know it gets harder, but she's asking for advice on education. She's asking for a whole bunch of advice, I suspect. She's very determined to lower smoking rates across New Zealand.
So you say that comparing tobacco to caffeine is a kind of quite common talking point of tobacco lobbyists and big tobacco. Are you worried at all in public health officials officials have raised concerns about this today. Are you worried at all about your New Zealand First Ministers echoing a lot of those sentiments that we hear from tobacco lobbyists and tobacco?
Well, I think we have incredibly good disclosure and perceived or real conflicts of interest mechanisms in place. I mean, give you a sense of it, I've asked it and all parties have confirmed. Parties have a declaration process around who has given them money, political parties. The other two parties in our coalition and ourselves have confirmed that we haven't received money in that regard.
So
But
you
but
have
the,
sought assurances about
yes, I have.
tobacco now? 'Cause on Monday I asked you that question, on Tuesday rather, and you said you weren't going to do it, you didn't see the need.
Well, no, I have asked the political parties. It's not my responsibility because it's a political party piece, but each party is governed by the Electoral Commission and actually declarations, as you well know. But I did ask for clarification after our conversation on Monday or Tuesday. But the second thing I say to you is that we also have a cabinet manual. The cabinet office has actually worked through with all of the ministers any perceived or real conflicts. And the third thing that I've done is make sure that every cabinet meeting that we start before the meeting kicks off, is we have a section of any agenda items that are here before the cabinet. Actually, is there any potential or perceived or real conflicts of interest that people need to declare so that we can manage that in the course of the conversation or the discussion. So, I think we've got a very robust disclosure regime. I think to manage perceived and real conflicts of interest, I think every minister is clear of their obligations under the cabinet manual. I'm putting in processes around cabinet meeting discussions and agenda topics so that any conflicts can be perceived. And I've taken the further step of actually dealing with the responsibility of political parties to follow the law to make sure that's clear.
You sought assurances from your New Zealand First Ministers that they haven't received any donations?
My office spoke to the officers of the other parties to confirm that those parties both came back to say that they haven't received their donations from tobacco companies.
You say to Winston Peters directly about her conduct?
No, not necessarily. No. Winston Peters and I talk regularly, daily, on a range of issues. Look, my conversations with Casey Costello, she is determined to lower smoking rates now amongst the 6.8% of daily smokers. And she's asking for a range of advice as a new minister. She's determined to do it. I've spoken to her about it. She's passionate about it. She cares about it. I've got confidence that she wants to do that.
Why would you seek this?
Just changing tack slightly, you may have seen this morning a number of social media CEOs brought before senators and told they had blood on their hands over social media harm, specifically over deaths related to social media harm. How much of an issue is that here, do you think? How much does that play on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the conversation in the US is around child sex exploitation. We have major challenges here in New Zealand around sex exploitation in particular. But what I'd say to you is, look, it's the tech companies are trying to balance, I guess, security and privacy, and obviously they're under different bits of legislation around the world, and they've got to try and work that out. They need to work harder. I think they need to work much harder. One of the things that I think they could do as quite a practical action is actually communicate much better the parental controls that are available. There's lots of conversations, as you'd be aware, in the US states about age limits and age verifications and all sorts of things, encryption of messenger services, for example. But what I'd say to you is that they need to keep working hard at this around making sure that they actually have the resources in place in their trust and security parts of their organisations so that they can actually continue to deal with this issue. And I want to make sure that I expect those tech companies to be well resourced in the trust and security spaces. I expect them to be able to communicate strongly the tools that are already available that should be deployed, particularly by parents with respect to children, and we as a government are fortunate that we have the Harmful Digital Communications Act in place, which is a good piece of legislation, but we should also take responsibility. If there's things that we need to tighten up and deliver in a much better way, we should continue to do that as well.
You've sought assurances on donations, but have you sought assurances on past New Zealand First if the tobacco industry in any way has shaped its tobacco?
No, look, all I can tell you is I deal with cabinet papers that come to me from ministers into cabinet, right? I'm not responsible for every single request that an individual minister asks of their officials as they're trying to deal with solving the problem that we've got or the opportunity that we have that I'm asking them to deliver on. I'm clear about the priorities I'm asking them to deliver. I'm clear about the delegations, being very clear about that, probably more clear than any previous Prime Minister about who's held accountable for delivering on what outcomes. I'm just, we're going through that process literally right now of receiving back, letters of actual goals and objectives that I'm expecting each of those ministers to do.
Are you actually seeking this advice? What is the point of her seeking that advice?
That's a question you have to ask the minister.
Would you be
Isn't the problem
concerned?
that-
Sorry.
Would you be concerned if the tobacco industry was involved in shaping New Zealand?
Well, look, I mean, MPs across the whole of political parties and of all political persuasions talk to a range of people from a range of sectors and a range of industries. You know that we're a small country, we have lots of connections with lots of people across the piece. But what I expect to do is to make sure that where there are perceived or real conflicts of interest, that they are declared very openly. I've tried to put in place the mechanisms to do that. I'm confident that they're working, and I'll be confident until they're not working.
So are you comfortable with the tobacco lobby having as much of an ear as your usual Kiwi who can get access to it?
That's not what I'm saying. You know what happens in Wellington in terms of different sectors from all across the economy will come in with lobbyists.
It's quite a specific sector though,
but I wouldn't have thought that you'd want the tobacco company writing your tobacco policy. Personally, that would be my view as a National Party leader. Yeah, I would have thought. But I'm just trying to explain to you that there will be conversations that happen, and people walk into. Doesn't mean they agree with that position, but we do try to make our politicians accessible, whether it's been in Labour governments or national-led governments, to make sure that actually they are engaging with their sectors. But that is not code, or there's not an excuse to say the tobacco industry should be inputting deeply into your policy development.
Prime Minister.
Obviously, you've fallen the cell phone ban.
Yeah.
But you may have seen this morning, Green Bay High School has replaced the entrance to one of its bathrooms with glass ceiling to roof. Do you think that's going too far?
I'm sorry, but I haven't seen that story, and I'm not sure as Prime Minister that's something I need to be commenting on.
Okay, but it is down to keeping an eye on students. It is down to making sure students aren't being distracted, right? It's all linked in.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, to rephrase it, how far do you think schools should be able to go?
I'll let Erica answer that.
Thank you. What we've done this term is actually put regulations in place that mean that schools have to consult with their communities about how they implement these policies. So that process is underway at the moment. School boards should be talking to communities about what sort of steps and actions they should put in place in order to enforce and how they're going to do a cell phone off and away all day policy. So I expect that that's happening at the moment. You might find with certain schools that I haven't heard the story you're talking about, but they may have other issues that are going on, and I haven't read the story, but there's lots of things that happen in schools that they have to make decisions about. I haven't heard the story. I'll certainly look into it. But at the moment, what should be happening is schools should be consulting with their communities if they haven't already done so, and if they have done so, then they'll be able to put their policies in place.
A couple of questions from the gallery, Prime Minister.
Yep.
How could Trump presidency impact our interest in
Well, I mean, AUKUS Pillar 2, as you know, under the previous government and our government, is something that we're up for exploring. It's pretty ill-defined at this point in time, and we genuinely are in the exploration phase because it's not defined as to what is in it or not in it. And that's something that we're interested in going, understanding more about it. And that's the same position that the previous government had that we have. All I'd say with what happens in domestic politics in the US, my job is to make sure I can work with whoever is needed to advance New Zealand's interests, and I'll continue to do that.
Can we get clarity on how many additional police this government will be adding to the roster? Because this morning Chris Bishop seemed to be saying that it was new rather than extra. It wasn't taking into account attrition.
It's actually 500 additional police officers within 2 years. Chris Bishop isn't the police minister, in fairness to Chris, but that's our clearly expressed goal.
Prime Minister, are you concerned about the Police Association casting doubt over that goal of 500, saying that the police jobs are just not attractive? People have to take pay cuts to enter the force. They don't feel that there's enough health and safety.
Yeah.
It's not attractive. Are you concerned at all?
Well, we're very concerned because what we've inherited is from a government after 6 years in power that's actually run our police force down, hasn't backed our police officers on the front line, has ended up actually leading to rising levels of crime and done nothing about it. So they have been incredibly soft on crime. We are a different government. We are here to back the police. We want the police to do well. You've started to see some of those changes in positions and tone over the course of the summer, I think, which has been very good. But there's a lot more work for us to do. And so we are very determined to make sure that the police is a great place to work. We're under no illusions how difficult the goal is. But I'm telling you, in a country that has been adrift for 6 years without any clarity about what it's here to do. So Erica and I, talking about education, we're happy to lay out the goals that we want to try and strive for. We're same in police. We know it's tough. We know it's difficult. I don't mind striving for something. We're going to do everything we can. We're going to bust our gut to make it happen as best as we possibly can. But if we fall short, we fall short. But we've done everything we can. We're certainly in a hell of a better position than where we are today. So that's the goal. So I want you to understand that, because you're going to see a lot of us as we come out publicly and start to talk about goals and outcomes, that we're setting them up there so we have focus in our system to go after the things that actually matter the most. We may fall short on some things, we may over-deliver on other things, but the point is we've got a direction of travel that the public service, the government and everybody can get behind.
And just to follow up, Mr. Luxon, there are reports of police officers and their families having to go to food banks because they're that hard up for cash. They've taken pay cuts from other industries to go into the police. now they're going to food banks, really hard to put food on the table. Should any police staff who risk their lives daily to keep this country safe have to do that?
Well, I mean, we have a major problem with our economy, and that's the point that we've been making. We have to repair our economy so we can restore law and order and deliver better public services. And the reality is, all New Zealanders, I have been to food banks, many of them, at quite regular intervals, and people that actually have good jobs and average incomes are there in record numbers across the whole of New Zealand at the moment. And so our job is to make sure that we can grow this economy, we can get inflation under control, we can lower the cost of living so that people actually can get ahead. And so that is a major focus. And I need New Zealand to understand that. If we can't get our economic engine bigger and more powerful and more sorted, how do we actually do the other things we need to do about investing in better public services, better pay for everybody? So, I mean, that's what we've got to do.
Is a pay rise for police actually on the cards?
Sorry?
Is a pay rise for police on the cards?
There's a negotiation that's underway now, and it would be inappropriate for me to comment on that.
The Police Association say they haven't received an offer since, mid last year.
Yeah, well, we've been in government we've had Christmas in 2 months.
So is the
give us some
priority
time.
to get an offer on the table?
That'll be a big focus of the course
What
this
are your
year.
expectations going to the iwi Chairs Forum tomorrow?
Oh, looking forward to it. I mean, I've met with many of the iwi leaders over the last 2 years, really, and particularly in the last 9 months as a result as well. And there's a huge amount of common ground with our government. We believe in localism and devolution. We believe in actually empowering Māori organisations to deliver services into local communities. We think that's a better way to go. You saw us do that before Christmas very quickly with a $50 million payment to work with Māori health organisations to deal with immunisation rates of children under the age of 2. And we want to work together to get those improved results and outcomes. So there's a lot of discussion there. Obviously, as we go into Waitangi Week, every Waitangi's got intensity to it and some controversy to it, but that's good. There should be some challenge and some provocation and some stimulation in those conversations. But in my conversations, there's a huge desire from iwi leaders to work with this government to improve outcomes, whether they be economic, social or environmental.
Rahui Papa says tomorrow's going to be a frank discussion. Do you have any message that you're trying to communicate from the government?
Look, I'll do that tomorrow, but again, my message is this is a government that actually wants Māori to do incredibly well, because when Māori do well, New Zealand will be doing well. And so we're very determined to work together on the challenges that we've got. Yes?
Prime Minister, speaking of
Sorry?
Will you continue funding school lunches next year after it says you're struggling to do so this year?
Yes, we are. We're committed to the school lunch program, as we said before the election campaign. We do want to look at it to make sure it can be fully optimised, and that will be a big piece of work that will go on through the course of this year as well.
And then also in that report, you were talking about one of the biggest issues as well is the mental health of our youngsters. What are you planning on doing to address that and that you discussed here?
Yeah, look, as you know, we've appointed a mental health minister, Matt Ducey, who's a mental health practitioner. It's his motivation for coming to Parliament. He's very passionate about it. As you've seen under the previous government, almost $2 billion was spent and no one could work out where it had actually gone. A lot of what we want to do is actually power up organisations. If you think about Gumboot Friday and I Am Hope, we've committed to give them $6 million. Why? Because they do 19,000 counselling sessions for 12,000 kids at a really good cost that is desperately needed, and actually they're doing great work. Every dollar that we invest with them is something like $8, some $50 into social benefit that we get. So we do want to move the money from the centre out to the community organisations that are getting good outcomes and results, and get the money flowing to them so they can do more at more scale in order to deal with the massive mental health challenges we've got across the country.
Are you happy with how David Seymour has consulted with Māori over the Treaty Principles Bill?
Look, I spoke to him last night. I know he's planning to go to iwi and the Iwi Leaders Forum tomorrow. I'm sure that'll come up under the way we've structured the agenda. There'll be a section there on tikanga and constitutional issues, and that'll probably where it will be discussed even further. And obviously it's a chance for him to be at Waitangi and to hear it clearly as well.
And your anniversary talk about his engagement with Māori on the Treaty Principles?
No. Just we have a good government. We have a very good coalition agreement. We've gone through a negotiation process that's built relationships. As I've said to you, we're working on those relationships, and so that's just how we work. I talk to the leaders regularly. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Confusion about your frontline policing policy. Why aren't your ministers across the targets?
Well, it's very clear. We're going to deliver 500 new police officers in 2 years. And as you saw yesterday, the Minister clarified his position, but there's been no ambiguity or any confusion from me about what that target is.
Can you guarantee that in 2 years from now there will be 500 additional police officers?
Well, as I said earlier, we're going to work incredibly hard to make sure that we can do that. We're putting the whole resources behind our system to make sure that we can do that. But as I also say, we're acknowledging how difficult it actually will be. But we're not afraid of having ambitious targets. And I don't think the game here is actually saying, oh, did you deliver your 500 police officers in 2 years or 3 years? The goal is to actually have a focus around recruitment so that we can lower young offending, so we can lower violent crime and actually ultimately lead to faster access through the courts.
Prime Minister, in terms of...
Sorry.
The anniversary of the floods just passed. You read in the report over 1,000 schools are now at risk of flooding. Talk about introducing adaptive pathways. What do those look like?
Well, I mean, you would have seen over recent weeks, actually, Mark Mitchell, who's responsible for cyclone recovery and emergency management, has actually talked about a series of investments in a number of places across New Zealand, particularly around flood defences, where there's been projects that have been quite obvious to do that we should be getting in place. If you go back through the press releases just in the last week or two, you'll see actually quite a big program of actually upgrades happening. We still have work to do, and we've got some work coming forward into our cabinet conversation very shortly around what else we need to do, particularly in the heavy hit areas around Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Auckland, and that will continue. I've visited, and that's one of the things in our 100-day plan. We want to be really clear about what else is needed to actually accelerate that recovery. You're right, in the long term, we need to make sure that we not just have climate mitigation, but we have climate adaptation. As I've said before, that is a multi-generational challenge because it's a big challenge for us and future generations. It's going to be managed by governments of different political persuasions over the political cycles, and therefore I'd like that to be as bipartisan as we possibly can. And so even in my conversations in opposition with James Shaw, we're very aligned around trying to find a framework to do that. It's hard work because actually no other country in the world's been able to crack that either. We're all wrestling with that challenge of how do you do this, because where does the balance sit with the individual property owner, with the local government, with central government, with insurances or companies or banks? They're not easy, and so it's not an easy pathway forward, but it is an important one that we have to find a way to crack it.
Can I ask a quick question on the firms and the immigration firms, sorry, the minister as well? It warns that low wage workers are leading to lower productivity. How does that square with your plans to open up immigration?
Well, I'm taking a range of advice at the moment. Labor's immigration reset was very much about increasing the number of high-skilled workers in New Zealand and reducing the number of low-skilled workers. That hasn't happened. In fact, exactly the opposite has happened. So I'm taking a range of advice at the moment on what we can do to tighten up our skills, and I'll have our settings, and I'll have more to say about that in coming weeks.
So we could see what the cat turned off, to use the horrible phrase, around low-wage workers coming in through the borders?
Well, there's a number of things that are going on at the moment. We've got higher than we would like migrant exploitation. It's at sort of record levels, so we have to clamp down on that. We've also got very high net migration. And so those two things actually go a little bit hand in hand when you're looking at changing settings, because if you're tightening up on migrant exploitation and you are checking documents and you're being more thorough with the investigations when you're looking at who's coming in, then usually that will have a flow-on effect of actually tightening up the numbers that are coming in as well. So we are taking a range of advice and we're looking at all the options and all the levers we can pull, and we will have more to say soon.
Just one more for the Prime Minister.
Sorry,
Yeah.
just one more on AUKUS, and I know the details are vague, but are you cognizant of the possibility that joining it could contravene or could fly in the face of our nuclear threats?
No, there's absolutely. We're going to maintain our nuclear-free position. When you look at the Rarotonga Accord, that is completely. It's about. You remember Australia's talking about nuclear-powered submarines, not nuclear-armed submarines. So that is not for change, or there is no movement on that whatsoever. Just want to reassure everyone around that position, and I've tried to be very clear about that. What AUKUS 2 is a rather undefined set of where there are potential projects or new technologies where different nations may be able to work together in a defence arrangement around those things. Again, they're not well defined at all. It's beyond AUKUS Pillar 2, and it's some thoughts about what those new technologies could be. That's where the discussion needs to go over the coming years. And so all we're saying is we're up for that conversation. You would have seen today that we've got Minister Peters and Minister Collins in Australia meeting with their counterparts. You would have seen already that very clearly we want to engage with the world and we want to manage New Zealand's interests in the world very strongly. And you've seen Minister Peters in particular particular, get into the Pacific. He's spoken to most of the foreign ministers around the world now. Last night I was talking with Prime Minister Lee. I've spoken to a number of world leaders myself over the period, and likewise you've seen Minister Collins actually building relationships with her counterparts as well. And you've seen also Todd McClay in trade out there in the world, first of all before Christmas, heading to India and Singapore, having just recently come back from the Middle East. So we are going to be a government that is externally oriented, because I think New Zealand has lost influence in the region, and we need to make sure that we are acting in our own interest with our independent foreign policy. As every other country has an independent foreign policy, we have ours, and we're going to protect New Zealand's interests. And that means that we do need to work with partners where it makes sense and we're aligned, as well as plot our own course where needed.
Hey, just finally, sorry.
And then
last
the
question.
school has to do lunchtime. So.
Okay, Rahui Papa says that there's been no consultation from David Seymour at all. What do you say to that?
Look, again, David Seymour's going to have that opportunity over the course of the weekend. All right, team. Thanks so much. See ya.
Thank you.